am Linda van Tilburg for Biz News. DigsConnect is a platform that connects students looking for a place to stay during university and landlords who have vacant spaces. It was started by Alexandria Procter in 2018, a student from the University of Cape Town with fellow student Greg Keel. Well, fast forward and DigsConnect is now the largest platform for finding a place to stay for students on the African continent. And we are privileged to have Alexandra with us in the studio. She's just released a book as well, and we want to discuss her journey. Hi, Alexandra. Welcome to Biz News.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
So let's start at what problem you were trying to solve when you started this company.
Well, I was just trying to solve my own problem, really. I mean, I was a student at UCT, I was on the SRC, and I had no plans to sort of be this, big Silicon Valley entrepreneur. I wasn't doing business science, I was doing a science degree. And I just had a problem on my desk, and that was I could not ever find a place to stay. My friends could never find a place to stay. And then when I was in the SRC, my portfolio was student housing, and I realized that, oh geez, 3/4 of the university can't find a place to stay. And so the work on my desk was just how to help these students. And solving that problem was how to find a place to stay where you weren't going to get scammed, or it was legitimate, or it was just pleasant and nice to stay in, really.
So how did you come up with a solution for DigsConnect?
So the solution was pretty obvious and sort of straightforward, staring me in the face, really, was that there was a queue of students, sort of out my door saying how to find a place to stay. And there were all these landlords, because even though, the universities themselves haven't built enough student housing, infrastructure isn't there. Only between 5 to 20% of students are housed on campuses across South Africa. You have the private sector in South Africa, and this is why South Africans are so awesome, because whenever there's not enough formal infrastructure, we kind of solve the problem ourselves. So what you have is private landlords, private individuals have been buying up houses, flats, and turning to student housing, and you got a whole new sector, new asset class called PBSA, purpose-built student accommodation. And these are basically large-scale property companies who are building properties suited just for students. And this is a massive industry around the world. It started taking foot in South Africa pretty recently. When we started in 2018, it was just starting. Now it's a lot bigger. And these properties are out there. And so I had a list of all these landlords and a list of all these students. And a list basically is a database. And a website basically is a database with nice wrapping on top of it. So it's just a question of taking this database and building a website. And I had done a few semesters of computer science while at UCT as part of my science degree. And so it's pretty easy just to literally pop it online. I did that over a weekend.
That's incredible. So how did you ensure that the quality of accommodation listed on DigsConnect is, the standard that a student wants? I mean, okay, students, we always think it's a bit of a hole, but no, students want something proper that they can sit down and study as well, where they can sit down and study as well.
No, absolutely. So, I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges we're facing right now is that, a huge proportion of students are dropping out, and especially your most vulnerable students are dropping out. So you're looking at students that are being NSFAS funded, they come from very vulnerable backgrounds, and it is so crucial that these students are getting a university education, they're getting qualifications, they're joining the workforce, they can break poverty cycles in South Africa. I'd almost say that the very future of our country depends on as many of these students graduating, joining the workforce, and becoming self-supporting and supporting the communities and their families as they possibly can. So it's crucial to get students to graduate. We've definitely seen a clear correlation between good student housing that is, conducive to academic success, that is safe, that is just a pleasure to be in, and these students graduating. So making sure the accommodation is nice is absolutely, the first step. When we started, it was very small. It was just UCT. You had to be UCT email address to sign up. And it was just the landlords that, our friends had been staying and that we had been staying, and that was kind of on the streets going up to campuses, going up to the campus on the hill there. So we all just kind of knew it. It's a close-knit community, which is so fun about starting that. I think a lot of people start businesses, they want to go global straight away. They're like, you need to be all over the world. But I think actually conversely, you become more successful if you start really, really small and you just get it right. And having that sort of tight-knit, small community feel was so important for us. Obviously, it can't always be like that. And if you start going bigger and bigger, you have to start leaning into tools to help you kind of keep that quality and that excellence as you scale. So there's some things I always say that technology is really good at and something that humans are really good at. And I think the two working in concert is how you make things scale. So for example, with technology, what you have will have an API as soon as someone signs up. And there are so many online tools to do identification checks, verification checks, title deed checks, credit checks, police record checks. So that can run in the background just through tech. And then the human side is how do you have humans go to properties, meeting the landlord, vetting them. And of course, the power of a platform is that it kind of, the community kind of self-supports. So after 6 years of having data of landlords listing on DigsConnect, we've had so many students go through these systems, stay at those properties and confirm this is a good property, it's really legit, it's lovely, or it's not so nice. And we've had it before with landlords. We've had to call them and be like, look, we've had a few students saying that this property has these issues. What's your plan to fix it? Let's just have a conversation around it. Sometimes things happen or whatever, but let's have a conversation. What's your plan? And sometimes they fix it and things are fantastic and we all move forward with our lives. Sometimes they don't fix it. And in that case, we have to delist them. So we are quite strict about that. And it's not a pleasant conversation, but I think that, it's our brand and we're putting a stamp of approval saying that students can go stay there. And if it's not good, then they go off the platform.
And you mentioned the importance of safety. How do you ensure the safety of students? Because I think when parents go with their little first year, the first time, that is the thing for them. Is it safe?
Yeah, I mean, as a South African woman, the first question always on our mind is safety. Always, you kind of walk at the front door and you're thinking about it all the time. And so that's exactly what I talk about, the two working cons of tech and people. So all those APIs I spoke about, when you're doing verification checks, identification checks, ID checks, it shows the person's a real human being. It traces it back to, the residential address. And so having a very good ID check on the human being. And like I said, visiting the properties to kind of check them.
So take us on your journey. It was 2018. What has happened since? How have you built out the platform? What kind of fundraising have you done?
Oh my gosh, since 2018, a lot has happened. How much time do we have? So I think it was such an interesting story because it's taken me on a path that I never anticipated, from the start. When we started this, I was just a kid, I was on SRC, I was a student leader, a student myself, just building a website to solve a problem in front of me. That was it. Never imagined any of this, to happen. It was just, I think, a journey of taking one step in front of the other and being delighted / horrified at times with what sort of happened. So, starting out is easy and exciting because you don't know what's ahead of you. So 2018 was just about building out a platform, which was just a project to solve a problem around me, realizing that we had insane growth and traction, that everyone loved what we were doing. Students loved it, landlords loved it, getting demand from other universities, wanted to join the platform, Stellenbosch, CPT, UWC, Varsity College, Vega, IMM, all these guys saying, please can we join? So having that happen, Greg joining a few months later, just the best decision ever. He's just absolutely incredible. 2019 was our first big fundraise, which again, we had not expected to really happen at all. We'd gone out to raise like 2 million Rand, which was pretty standard at the time for South African companies doing their seed funding round. Your seed funding round is your very early stage funding. And ended up raising 12 million Rand, which again was one of those massive tectonic shifts. It's actually chapter 1 in the book because that's kind of was when things became real. As soon as you take someone else's money on, everything changes. You have a massive responsibility there to those people, especially 12 million Rand, for a 24-year-old. It's a massive responsibility. It's not just your life, your mistakes, your money, your time. Suddenly it's like you have a contract, and responsibility to these people. And you've taken away, for example, that I always think about that money could have gone to a bunch of other startups. Why did they make the right decision to back us? And with this, how can we do good? How can we perpetuate, not perpetuate even, how can we exponentially increase the value of this to create value? That's the role of an entrepreneur, is to create value and to increase value in the world. And that value can then obviously you can go out and you can then swap and trade it and grow it, whatever. You have to start that value and grow that. So that was, taking that funding on in 2019 was just using that rocket fuel to just grow as fast as we can, which was just 2019 was probably one of the craziest years of my life. That's when I learned everything I knew about, blitz scaling a startup, figuring out a business model, figuring out how to hire, how to grow the team, offices, the legals, the financials, getting that up and rolling, building out the product, building our app. our app hitting #1 in South Africa, which was crazy. And then 2020 came along, and we all know what happened in 2020. And being an early stage founder during the COVID pandemic, during lockdown, university shutting down, was completely different then, kind of working through that. And that's a whole other conversation about surviving 2020, 2021, pivoting the business, pivoting the model, figuring out how to do that. Then 2021 was our global expansion in the middle of, at the back of COVID, which was mad. Working with our new business model, launching globally, signing some insane partnerships, doubling every year since then, exploring some other verticals. We explore some other verticals at the moment with some partners. So yeah, it's been it's been an MBA every day. It feels like it. And of course, the other thing, aside from my business, was that in 2021, I got appointed to the board of the National Youth Development Agency by the president. So I got a call one night from the president appointing me to the board. And for the last 2 years, I've been, working with the government. And that's been also an insane chapter of my life. I started getting involved in geopolitics. And so I started representing South Africa at G20, at COP28, at BRICS, and understanding basically the nuances and the levers that work in this global economic system that we're a part of, and these big global egos and levers at play, and figuring that out. And it's, how do you move humanity forward, civilization forward, but understand that there's a lot of entrenched interests in this. So it's been, and of course the book deal on top of that. So it's definitely been a hell of a ride so far.
That definitely sounds like it. So where are you now? How many users are you, and how many countries are you at the moment?
So we've got a couple 100,000 users on the platform. And then in terms of countries, that's actually another interesting story, is that we were just in South Africa, or just in Cape Town. And then we started expanding out to other cities in South Africa. And then we signed this incredible global partnership that launches to 400 cities globally, over 30 countries, 1.3 million beds. And it was very exciting. And I made one of the most classic mistakes a founder can make, or a young entrepreneur can make, and saying yes to all of this. I was like, brilliant. We're going to launch in UK, the US, Canada, Europe, Australia, Singapore, and it sounded amazing. But in retrospect, what do I know about housing in Singapore? You have to be the best in your market. I didn't know anything about that. So even though it was exciting, it was definitely a vanity metric. And we've had to dial back substantially to be like, what do we actually want to do? We want to be excellent. Absolutely excellent. To our users, want them to have an incredible experience. I don't think that will be the case if we overextend ourselves and spread our resources to this massive extent, working markets I don't really quite understand. And I think that slow, sustained, controlled growth, where you keep, the excellence of your service offering, is the bedrock of a successful long company. Whereas overextending yourself and being then a bit sloppy with your services and with your quality because you've just done too much, is how things fail. You overextend yourself, you have to raise, you've got very precarious finances. I just didn't like that. Growth is exciting. People love writing about growth, and you get lots of likes on LinkedIn, you write about growth. But actually, being a bit boring sometimes is, I think, a good company. I like boring businesses. And so we dialed back massively, and now we're actually operating in 2 countries. And that is the UK and South Africa. And the reason that makes sense is because the UK is a market that I can understand much more easily than anywhere else. I only speak English, so there's no language barrier. It's only 2-hour time difference, so our teams in South Africa can work very easily in the market. So most importantly, there's dual seasonality. So the academic year in South Africa starts in February. The academic year in the UK starts in September. So we can very easily kind of work between the two. And I kind of hop up and down between the two. It's a direct flight. So I can really lock down these 2 markets quite nicely and maintain that excellence before expanding out again.
So does the platform have a different name in the UK than South Africa?
It doesn't. That's a very good question. Digs is very common. The word Digs is very common in South Africa. Everyone knew what DigsConnect was. It was an obvious name to use. In the UK, it's not as common. The name for a Digs in the UK is called an HMO, and no one calls a big property, they call it PBSA. So they have very specific words here. The student housing market is very formalized. There's a lot more competitors. There's a lot more money in this. It's been very different to working. It's interesting is if this market is so different from South Africa, then working in Europe or Australia or Singapore would be even more different. I mean, there's a lot more regulation here, a lot more international students. Whereas the word digs itself, everyone knows what a digs is. It's not like an unknown word. It's just not very common. We won't be changing the name. I feel like you can just kind of brand the name. It's like Spotify. What does Spotify mean? But everyone knows what Spotify is. What does Airbnb mean? So we would just launch DigsConnect as the brand, and maintain that.
Well, then you've got a book as well. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the book. So I think that storytelling is the most powerful way to convey information and education and lessons. I think it's engaging, I think it's exciting, I think it's a deep part of our humanity to enjoy stories, engage in stories, and cultures across the world have always engaged in storytelling. And what I wanted was to convey a message of two things. First is about startups, how cool they are. They're such cool vehicles to instigate change, to build value in the world. They're really fun, and almost create a playbook for that. I think a lot of people want to build companies but don't really know how. And instead of having a sort of a boring textbook type thing where you're just like yawning your way through it, tell that narrative, building a startup from developing an MVP, which is your minimal viable product, hiring, to creating value, to iteration cycles, to speaking to customers, to doing sales, to doing marketing, to building products, all those things, but building into a narrative. So that was the first part. The second part I wanted to do is convey a feeling, and that's a feeling of hope. I think that you have to have radical self-belief and a lot of optimism. Pessimism is the killer of startups, of productivity, of implementing change. If you think things aren't worth doing, you're not going to do it. You have to believe the future is good, that things are exciting, that you can have an impact. And I want to convey a feeling that not only are you fully equipped to change your own life, but you're fully equipped to change the broader story of humanity and civilization. And that's done through optimism, through thinking things are cool, through thinking that, having a mindset of gratitude and just getting stuck in and being excited and feeling stoked about this. So that feeling of things being awesome and fun and exciting, along with, here's a playbook, also how I did it, was what I wanted to tell the story about. And that's what Upstart is essentially about. It's a story about someone who had no idea what they were doing, who was absolutely kind of never really fitting in anywhere, and saying, look, I'm going to do it. And this is kind of how I did it.
And what are your future plans now?
So my future plans right now, I'd say, is almost changing gear to being more long-term in terms of my upward productivity. I think the last couple of years have just been go, 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 go. And I've definitely burned candle at not only both ends, but every single end, just sort of set it alight. And while it's been really exciting and it's been a bit rock and roll, and I feel like I've gone through a lot of work, it hasn't been very sustainable. And I've definitely had, 2 burnouts that have been quite productive. I think this whole idea of stay up all night and, just go, go, go isn't actually very long term. And I feel like I'm just almost at the, very beginning of what I've done. I feel like I've almost done nothing compared to what I want to do for the world and the value I want to add. And so what I really want to do is rather think, how can I build long term? And I think it comes to lifestyle changes. So I'm trying to really figure out, how to work to optimize things like sleep and my nutrition and exercise. I really prioritize friends, family, community, so that I'm building long term. I mean, in terms of wanting to really add value in the world, I think it's so important to have, a long term thinking around that. So yeah, I'll say personally it's that. And in terms of my work, just keep on keeping on. It's a really exciting year this year, particularly 2024, for work in politics and in governance. It's the biggest election year for democracy in the history of humanity. 49% of the world is going through elections right now, so that's really exciting. I think where the world's at right now is really exciting. With technology that's coming out right now is really exciting. So being a part of that, really into that, but in a sustainable way.
Alexandria Procter, thanks so much for speaking to us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.